When I was 13, I got sick, and I thought I had rheumatic fever, and I didn't get better. There's a couple of kids my age had rheumatic fever at the same time, and I thought that's what I had, but I did. They got better, but I didn't. I just kept getting worse and worse. I spent my 13th birthday in the hospital. They sent me to the hospital because the doctor wanted to try this new. I had Bright's disease, and at that time, Bright's disease was a fatal disease. It was not contagious, but there was another boy a year older than me, and one from a nearby town that had it in the same time period I did, and they both died. But the doctors, they sent me to the hospital, and I was getting, penicillin was relatively new. That was mostly developed in World War II, but it was relatively new. But they had this new drug they wanted to try on me, so I had one shot of something once a day, another shot twice a day, another shot 3 times a day, and another shot every hour for about a week. And I was in the hospital on my 13th birthday. I got a speedometer for my bicycle, who my mother didn't think I'd ever use. A blue pocket knife in my hand. I remember getting those 2 presents and opening them in the hospital. But I started to get better. So they finally sent me home, and I missed 2 months of school. They set up a bed. We lived kind of on a little hill. There was a big window in front, and they set up a bed for me so I could see what was going on outside. And there was 7 teams of horses going by twice a day to feed their cattle, and that was their highlight, was waving at me. You fill out forms, and that you always list the diseases you've had, and I had to list Bright's disease, and the doctor told me you didn't have Bright's disease because nobody survives Bright's disease. You must have had a kidney nephritis, he said. And so I talked to the doctor. Next time I saw him, it was several years later, and he says, nobody survives. I said, the doctor told me nobody survives Bright's disease, and he said, well, nobody but you. And he says, if I were you, I just wouldn't put that down because they're all going to question that you had that. Just put you had a kidney infection. So from then on, that's all. He says, you've got no ill effects from it. Your kidneys are fine. So when I fill out the form, I don't put down I had Bright's disease. Whether I did or didn't, I survived it. And I think it was thanks because of penicillin, the high doses they were giving me. Okay, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, we ran cattle up the Weber Canyon above Oakley, and we had the West Hills where the cattle were across. You had to cross the Weber River to get the cattle, but the river was high, and my dad, we were on horses, and he'd say he'd have his horse, and he said, you get right below me, because the river was high, and this is in the spring, and running fast and deep, and he says, you get right below me, and we'll go across the river. So we did that. And he says, if you ever fall in the river, don't fight the current. Just swim downstream, because rivers run back and when rivers run, they go to one bank, then hit the other bank. So, okay, no big deal. But we got the cattle, we took them up the canyon, and at South Fork, where we normally took the cattle, there was a bridge across the river. The river was so high, it washed the bridge out. So we took the cattle 3 miles downstream and went across the river on another bridge and came up the other side and turned the cattle loose and came back there was a whole bunch of guys, 10 or 12 guys, but we didn't want to ride down there so we can cross the river again. And it's a treacherous river when it's high. In the summer it looks like this peaceful stream, but we crossed the river and I was the last one to come into the river, and my horse was thirsty and was trying to drink, and it took my horse and tipped it upside down. And I remember I was on the bottom of the river on the rocks with the horse on top of me, and all I could think of was I had to get away from the horse. And if I'd have had enough sense to just grab the saddle or something, the horse got up and made it out, but I went down the river. And the guys yelled, and my mother was in the car waiting for us across the river. "Jerry's in the river," somebody yelled. And they couldn't, the brush was so thick, the guys that was across the river couldn't keep up with me. And I went down the river, and that thought crossed my mind: don't fight the current. I'm swimming down the river, and had the first Stetson hat I ever owned. I had on, and it hadn't come off yet, but I'm swimming, and my hand hits my hat, so I knock the hat off so I can swim better. And I go down the river probably 100 yards, and it washed me over I went over, and there was a whole bunch of dead willows, and I grabbed a big armful of willows and thought, and they broke off, and I just swung around, and I'm going down the river again. And I probably went another. And I'm thinking, I was okay. I could swim, and I wasn't in danger at all, except I was. And I thought, this time I've got to grab some green willows. So when I went to wash me to the shore again, and I grabbed an armful of green willows, and they held me, and I was able to get out, and I'm walking up the river at the bank when the guys on horses finally got down to where I was. But I listened to my father. And that's what we need to pattern our lives, so we can listen and recognize the voice of your father. So pattern your lives and listen to your father.